putting the slideshow up for, I was thinking about putting this slideshow up for download on my Ko-fi page, so keep an eye on my Ko-fi page for that. It'll be available to download for free. Full transparency. I try to keep my resources free for folks to download. Okay. So there should be a button for chat. There it is. Okay. So can everybody see this okay? Because I'm seeing the notification on my screen that the screen sharing's active. Sweet. I'm seeing yeses. Fantastic. All righty. I'm going to give it a couple of more minutes, but we'll have it sitting here for a little bit. I'm thinking probably 5:05 I can get started. So just a quick poll with the chat. How many of you folks have done one or two events before, or how many of you are like totally new to this? If you want to share that, feel free to do so. Okay, so we got one totally new. Fantastic. Nope, never. Part of why I wanted to stop by. Fantastic. Well, lucky for you, I have like 10 years of experience doing this kind of stuff. So I got a whole bunch of tips for you. I actually just came back from an event recently. I mean, not as cool as DC Zine Fest. I will say that. But I was actually at DC Zine Fest earlier, not this month, last month, because it was in October. That was a very fun time, by the way. Okay, at around 5:05, I will start the presentation in earnest. I'm going to give folks a couple more minutes to straggle and come in. Okay, microphone sounding good. Just got a glance to go to the Philly Zine Fest. It really made me want to try tabling there next year. One of these days, I will also be at Philly Zine Fest. I'm hoping that maybe you and I can make it at the same time. That would be cool. Because Philly Zine Fest is one that's been on my radar for a little while. Would love to go there someday. Charlie says, I went to Short Run Comics Fest in Seattle as a customer. Had a blast. Ooh, that does sound fun. I had not actually heard of that one before. I'm going to have to put that on my radar. Don't mind me while I take notes. Tip number one, if you discover the name of a show you've never heard of before, make note of it as fast as you can. Short Run Comics with an X Fest. Seattle. Okay. Fantastic. We got one more minute and then I will start. And okay, my clock now says 5:05. So if we are good, then I can start. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I am Kelci D Crawford. I make comics and a whole ton of zines. I also have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/@KelciD Comics, and that's KELCID Comics. Today, I wanted to work with y'all in collaboration with Queer Zest Zine Fest to talk about tabling at conventions and other events for beginners. And we're going to be covering a lot. So I'm going to get right into it. First of all, who am I and what am I doing here? Like I said, I am Kelci D Crawford. I've been tabling at events since 2013. One of the first ever shows that I did was a little local event in Ohio called the Rathacon. You'll discover as you get your toes further and further into events that a whole lot of them just love puns. because there's the Rathacon, and then there's also Genghis Khan in Cleveland. Fantastic. I am, in fact, genderqueer. Please use they, them pronouns for me. And I've been making trans and genderqueer comics since I started tabling at events. One of the first ever comics that I did was the webcomic Validation in collaboration with writer C. Baranek. She did the writing, I did the art. I've also done the genderqueer pirate epic, The Legend of Jamie Roberts, which is still ongoing, and a whole ton of other stuff. But in short, I've always had stuff at my table since I've started going to events. So for this panel, Tabling for Beginners, what are we going to cover? We're going to cover the types of events that there are. We're going to cover a bit the differences between, say, comic conventions, anime conventions, zine fests, and that sort of thing. And in doing that, we're going to talk about what event may be best for you. What do you bring with you? How do you set up your table? How can you be a good table neighbor? And what are your goals when you table at an event? We're also going to cover a whole lot more stuff. We'll get there when we get there. So first, finding events, because that's half the battle, is finding where you want to set up shop, right? So when we're finding events, what kind of events are you looking for? Here's where I'm going to start talking about, like, there's a difference between the feel of a Comic-Con versus the feel of a zine fest versus the feel of like an art fair versus the feel of an anime convention. All these shows have very different vibes to them. It really depends on the kind of vibe that you're going for. I would encourage you, if you are totally new to tabling at events, start local, like within your town or within your area, or at least within your reach. If you have a car, try to keep it within a certain amount of driving distance from where you're situated. If you're taking public transit, maybe consider how far of a commute it's going to be to get to said events. I will say, if you're in the DC area, like Washington, DC area, there's a whole lot more shows that happen on any given weekend than in a lot of metro areas that I've noticed. I'm largely based in Ohio, so a lot of the events that I find are often situated around Columbus or Cleveland. There are some in Cincinnati, and then there are some in Toledo. So like the major cities will often have something going on. But again, start local, start preferably with like a 1-day show. Those exist. That way you don't have to worry about like the cost of hotel or anything. And as far as like the vibes go, like you really won't know what kind of show you want to table at until you go there as an attendee. But another way that you can suss out the vibe of a show is by going to their website. So finding these events, you can find them a couple of different ways. You can join zine making groups online through like Discord, or chatting with folks on Blue Sky or on Tumblr, all of that good stuff, or talking with your fellow neighbors at Queer Zest Zine Fest. Heck yeah. But there's also a couple of different websites that will have conventions listed for you to check out. The two that I recommend are keepitweird.art, because they are specific to zine fests. Now, they're particular to the United States and Canada. I don't recall if they have any international shows listed on keepitweird.art. But if you're based in the US or Canada, it's a really comprehensive list. They break it down by region, and they also let you know when was the last year that this show was active, and websites if they have that information and all that stuff. The other tool that I can share is my own convention tracker spreadsheet. You can access that at tinyurl.com/MidwestCons. Yes, I just dabbed. I'm not apologizing. But that URL that's on the screen right now will take you directly to the spreadsheet. And this spreadsheet it updates as frequently as I can get to it. Now, the caveat to this spreadsheet is that It does cater a lot to the Midwest. So there's a lot of shows for like Ohio, West Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, that surrounding area. But there are some shows in DC that have made it to the list. There are some shows for like Arizona that have made it onto the list. There's also, I think, one or two from the West Coast that have gotten on there, some from New York. If you have updates for that sheet that you would like to share, you can hit me up on my email, which is on that spreadsheet. And I can update that spreadsheet as soon as I can. But that is a free resource that y'all can use. I love sharing that with folks. You can also, in terms of like, where else can I find other events? You can just also ask other artists. Just approach them and be like, hey, what was your favorite show to go to? If you really want to get really spicy, ask them, what shows did you not have a fun time at? Because people will be honest about that. So yeah, absolutely reach out to your fellow artists. Check out keepitweird.art. That's the actual URL, is keepitweird.art if you're looking for specifically zine fests. You can also check out my spreadsheet at tinyurl.com/MidwestCons. What do you bring with you once you have found a con to go to? Well, first and foremost, your work and yourself. And towing into this is that question of whether to make fan art or original art, particularly if you're trying to go for the vibe of like going to a Comic-Con or an anime con. The best answer that I can give to that is make the stuff that you want to make. Like, if there's a fandom that you're seeing is like really popular, but you're not into that, don't make stuff for that, because people can kind of tell when you're just not jazzed about a particular thing. So make the stuff that you want to make and that you want to share, and have that kind of energy of like a toddler showing off their doodles on the refrigerator, being like, look at this thing I made. It's amazing. Oh, you want to take a second? Because Milo posted in the chat, networking has helped me find other local zine fests. People usually share fest signups on their Instagram story. Yes, that is another good way to find signups, as well as checking any relevant Ko-fi pages, ko-fi.com. Detroit Zine Fest actually posted on their Ko-fi page that they're accepting table applications until December 1st. So if you're in the Detroit area, check that out. One moment, please. Okay. As far as what to bring, that's basically my thoughts about fan art versus original art. I am biased. I prefer making my own original things. I have shared this tip with others before. If the idea of drawing original characters sounds like a really hard sell for folks, then just if you want to make prints, etc., pick a theme and then draw to that theme. Like recently, I've been on a kick for drawing cats, like anthropomorphic cats. So I've been drawing just anthropomorphic cats for days. And by doing that, that gives me material to make into stickers or mini prints or other little art zines and that sort of thing, because that's the thing that I'm jazzed about. Make the stuff that you're jazzed about, is what I'm saying. You also want to pack display items. And this is the part where I'm like, try to avoid Amazon as much as you can. For display items, it helps to go vertical as much as you can. So, like, do you have to have a spinner rack like this one on the slide? You don't have to, but it does help. I'll get into the story of how I got that spinner rack in a second. There are also book displays, like wood displays. There is a website I recommend called cleardisplays.com. They have all kinds of wood displays that are really easy to take apart and put back together again. They also, like, they have wood displays and they have clear plastic ones. So highly recommend cleardisplays.com. You can also find other display items by going to thrift stores like Goodwill. I've actually gotten a couple of different shelves by just going to a Goodwill and being like, ooh, this can fit in my suitcase. I'll take this with me. And other thrift stores are also a really good way to find props for things. I have done the really thrifty thing of using empty DVD cases to stick stickers on for display and then just like prop them up. So get creative with stuff. Another good place that you can find display items are stores going out of business or just craft stores or mom and pop shops. The story of how I got that spinner rack is that I knew the person running a little craft store in my area called Cat's Paw Art Studios. And I was working part-time at the Michaels at the time. And the Michaels I was working at was going out of business. And I got this like enormous wood display thinking this will be perfect for zines. And then I discovered it was too heavy. So I took that sucker, went into Cat's Paw Art Studios, and I looked at Amanda and went, so this thing is too big. And I know that you're not using that wire spinner rack anymore. Would you like to trade that wire spinner rack for this enormous honking beast? And she said yes. And that's how I got this thing. Other good ways that you can get display items is just thinking about Michaels again. Sometimes Michaels and other craft stores will have cardboard displays for particularly holiday stuff. Sometimes you can just go in there and like when the season is over, you can ask them, hey, do you still have those displays? Can I have those? Because otherwise it's just going to go into the trash compactor. So you might as well give them a second life and take the display items for yourself. I've done that before too. So nothing is off limits. I do have another resource that I would like to share, which is the Master Convention Packing List. You can download that for free at tinyurl.com/conpacking. It's a free downloadable PDF that I made that is just a master checklist of things to pack to bring with you for a convention. And this will include things that you normally wouldn't think about, like rubber bands, masking tape, bottles of water, a little first aid kit, and things of that nature, and bulldog clips. You'd be surprised, even if you don't use bulldog clips for your own setup, you can be that nice table neighbor that if somebody asks you, hey, do you have a spare bulldog clip? You can just give them one. We'll get into the practice of being a good table neighbor in a few minutes. But just keep in mind that even if you don't have an immediate use for a particular item, somebody else probably would. So just stuff to consider. But that master convention packing list is at tinyurl.com/conpacking. It is free for you to download. Is bulldog clip a regional term for binder clips? It must be, because I am talking about binder clips. I think I have them right here. Yes. So if you look at my camera for my face, I am talking about these little guys. Yum, 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 yum. These guys. I call these bulldog clips, but others call them binder clips. But yeah, it's these little guys. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you. I thought it was those. Yes. Yeah, this is what I get for being an Ohio local. Okay. So I would recommend, particularly if you're new, and if you have the space and the time for it, set up a trial at home as a practice round. Like, it helps if you know how big of a table space that you got. But in general, practice for a 3-foot table space and a 6-foot table space. Those are the most common table sizes that you're going to get booked for at a zine fest or any other event. Different shows will have different size tables, but the most common sizes are going to be 6 feet and then half of that amount if you're sharing a table with somebody. So 3 feet. If you can, set up at home as a practice round. That way you can time yourself and figure out how long you're going to take to set up your table setup. You can set it up, figure out what the best arrangement is for different items, and then you can time it to take it down and figure out how much time it takes to take down your displays. It'll also help you troubleshoot, like, just thinking about this recently with because this last event I shared a table with my buddy Chloe, and she has these wire display racks for displaying prints. It's those grid wire like cubes that have been really popular, particularly with print sellers. But she had a set of those, and doing practice runs at home working with those really, really helpful so that you can troubleshoot. Oh, if the grid looks weird, it might be because this particular joint didn't lock in place. Or, oh, I need a hammer so that I can put things into place and shove them into place and not have to worry about hurting myself. Um, like practicing at home is a good way to test, like, if you're going to need extra tools for setup or anything like that. Charlie asks, am I correct in assuming most events have the tables already out and you just have to go to your assigned space? This varies from show to show. I will let you know that now. At most zine fests, they will provide the table for you. When you're considering comic conventions, that is it depends on the venue. I've had it happen where some shows will say it's this much of a table fee for this amount of space, and it's extra if you want us to provide a table for you. So if you need to get a table, I would recommend getting one of those fold-up 6-foot tables. I would also recommend, hold on, I'm going to share this. So if you look at my camera, I also have what I call my table extender. This little thing is maybe 2 feet long, but having that can give you a little bit of an extension on the side or in the back. That can come in handy if you have something that takes up a lot of space, particularly if you're going to bring prints with you, or if your vertical displays are of a particular size and you're like, oh no, you know? The only thing is if you're going to need a table extender like that, which is just a smaller card table, basically is what that is, or a like fold up TV tray table, if you're going to be bringing those, you have to put those behind the table. A lot of events will have rules about do not put anything in front of the table because that would block the traffic. The important thing for events like comic conventions and zine fest is that they don't want the thoroughfare blocked off. So keep anything under the table, behind the table, or on the side of the table. That would be my recommendation there. Okay. With all of this, it is very important to communicate with the event organizers. I will say, because I have done comic conventions, anime conventions, zine fests, art fairs, events hosted by local art commissions, etc. The best groups I have found are zine fests. Zine fests are very good about asking if you have accessibility needs. Like if you need to be situated near the bathrooms, near the exits, away from the exits. Detroit Zine Fest application actually has like a checklist of please check off the areas that would be most accessible for you. And it includes spots like put me near the food trucks, put me near the bathrooms, put me away from the loudspeakers, and that sort of thing. In my experience, zine fests are generally very good about asking where you would like to be placed, or at least what your preference is. Even if they don't give you like exact table numbers, because you won't know your exact table spot until usually much later. But still, in particular, you can let the event know, hey, I have these kinds of accessibility needs. And Zine Fests are generally really good about that. Comic conventions tend to take place in venues that are already supposed to be ADA compliant. For folks outside of the US, that means Americans with Disabilities Act, which means that there has to be certain accessibility things included with the venue. Most comic conventions take place at venues that are already compliant with those kinds of requirements. Not always, not always, but generally. There will be some shows that will happen in a venue that might be a little trickier for folks to get to. So just communicate with the organizers if you have certain needs, like, hey, I'm in a wheelchair. Is there an elevator here? Or anything like that. You can also check where the loading area is, because often the loading areas will have ramps. Also, the loading area is typically where, if you're bringing a car with you, the loading area is where you want to try to park your car if you can. Some larger venues, I'm thinking in particular of the Walter E. Washington Convention Center. You're not typically allowed to park your car where the loading bay is, because the loading bay is get in, do your stuff, get out. But loading areas, typically you can bring your vehicle in, you can unload, and then the event will usually tell you where you can park your car if you brought your car with you. Also check with the organizers when setup is and when the closing hours are. Now, many events will have an email that they will send out before the event starts, communicating all this stuff. Some shows that are newer at this may not communicate this stuff. And in that case, you got to follow up with them and be like, hey, when's the setup time? Where am I setting up? Where do I park my car? That kind of stuff. In my experience, the events that don't send out an email specifying all that stuff are generally very new at organizing. So you're going to need to reach out to them and get some clarification. Most events will send out an email before the show starts. Now, it could be a week before the show starts, a month before. It could be any span of time between the two, but they will email you or find some other way to communicate with you to let you know, here are our setup hours. You can get to the loading bay this direction. Here's where you park your car if you brought your vehicle with you. Here are the rules for when the show is open. This is what is allowed while the show is open. Here are our closing hours. And they will often tell you, like, the absolute hard stop, like, you have to be packed up and out by this time. And you got to honor that, because often the conventions or the Zine Fests or the other events are renting out those spaces, and they only booked it for a certain amount of time, and you got to respect that. Also check with the organizers how big your space is and what your table size is. I've definitely had it happen where I go to an event and I think, oh, I have 6 feet of table space. And then I get there and it turns out I have 3 feet. And I've also had the opposite happen. So just be prepared. And also double check with the organizers how big your space is and how big your table is. Also check if there is a contact for emergencies at the show. Often when they send that email talking about this is set up, here's where you park, etc., they will often have an emergency contact included in that email. If they do not, reach out and ask. You got to have a contact in case of emergencies. Most events are safer spaces, and they do take that seriously, but it is better to have a emergency contact number just in case. Also check what the food options are, where the bathrooms are, and any accessibility needs that you have. I've had it happen before where I do an outdoor show and the bathrooms are not readily accessible. either because they're porta potties or because the bathrooms are on an entirely separate part of the field. And we'll get to good neighbor practices in a minute, but definitely check where the bathrooms are and check what the food options are. Some events will have food trucks. Some events, particularly if you're going to comic conventions or anime conventions, if you're going to an event that is in a convention hall, convention centers will provide their own food, but it is always more expensive. Keep that in mind. But check what the food options are if the venue has food around the area and what those options are. Also check if volunteers will be available. Some shows, particularly Zine Fests, will have volunteers walking around to check in on you, to be like, hey, do you need water? Hey, do you need me to watch your table while you run to the bathroom? And that sort of thing. So definitely check to see if volunteers are available to help with that sort of thing. Some shows, I would actually recommend, I would recommend if you're looking at tabling at GalaxyCon, regardless of what city that you're in, approach with caution. In my experience, GalaxyCon does not have volunteers walking around to check in on you like this. That said, there are events in the Pittsburgh area that are generally very good about having volunteers walking around and checking in on you and that sort of thing. Okay. Etiquette 101. So these are things that if you practice these, that just makes you a very good table neighbor. Key number 1, and this is very much for my buddy Ben, keep your gear to your table area and try not to spread out too much. Like, there's a reason that the organizers will give you a certain amount of space to work with. And that is so that if you need to spread out your stuff, you know what your area is that you can spread out your stuff in. I'm calling out my friend Ben because he just scatters stuff all over the floor, and I have to be the one to be like, no, shove it into the line. So yeah, that happens a lot whenever Ben and I have to share a table. So just try to keep your gear to the designated area that you have been given. Use the space under the table to your advantage. It's not just for storage, it's also a good place to like hide stuff while you're setting up stuff. I would also recommend introducing yourself to your table neighbors and, if you can, the organizers, but in particular, the table neighbors. These are the people who are tabling next to and around you. Introduce yourself to them, get to know them, learn what they have. See if maybe put a pin in your mind to be like, oh, I'd like to do a trade with them later. We'll get to trades in a minute. But definitely check what your table neighbors have. That way, if an event attendee is looking for something, you can point them in the right direction. Or if volunteers are not available, you can ask your neighbor to watch your stuff while you're taking a quick break. You can also offer to reciprocate for that for them if they need to get up and run to the bathroom or run to get food or anything of that sort. Be quick about it. Please respect their time. This was something that Zine Fest in the past had warned about in their email communications with vendors is, yes, we have volunteers available. Please do not monopolize their time by having them watch your table for like an hour or something. Please respect the time and the energy of the volunteers and your table neighbors. So if you have to run to the bathroom, that's fine. If you have to run to get food, that's fine. But please don't take like an hour to do that if you can avoid it. I mean, if the line is long, that can't be avoided. But try to respect the time of your table neighbors and ask them to honor your time. But all in all, getting to know your table neighbors is also a great like networking experience, so that if you spot a neighbor and you're like, oh, I'd love to work with you sometime, then you can introduce yourself to them. it's just great to know your table neighbors. I have met so many good people that way. Okay, I'm gonna try to speed this up because I see what time it is and I'm like, I think we're about halfway through. Anyway, so that's the basic gist of etiquette 101. And also ask your neighbors if they're down to trade with you. I have noticed zine fests are the best place to do trades. Like if you want to trade with your table neighbors or trade with anybody else at an event, zine fests are the best place to do it. Comic conventions are kind of a crapshoot if people want to trade with you or not. Anime conventions, odds are pretty high. Folks don't want to do trades, and you got to respect that. Sometimes people may not be down to do trades because either they paid a lot for the hotel, or they paid a lot for the table, or they paid a lot to get to that event itself. Like, particularly for anime conventions, I've heard of artists and merchandisers who've had to get plane tickets to get to those events, and those suckers are not cheap. So, if the person that you're talking to is like, I can't really do trades, I gotta really push sales because I gotta make up the cost for things, you gotta respect that. But if they are down to do trades, absolutely do trades because that's how I got this plethora of stuff. These are just the acquisitions that I got from DC Zine Fest a few weeks ago. Highly recommend doing trades with folks. Now, you might be asking, how do I determine what a good trade value is? The way that I do it is basically market price. So like if somebody looks at my table and they're like, "Oh, I really like this thing." And you would normally sell it for like $7. You can trade something at their table for the rough equivalent of $7. That's how I like to do it. Everybody does trades differently. Milo says, I love doing trades. I also do a trade haul post on Instagram tagging people that I traded with. Yes, that is a good way to give shout outs to folks. I am not on Instagram anymore, but when I was on Instagram, this was something that I did a lot. So yeah, absolutely do the trades. Charlie says, I brought a large zine option and some mini zine options. So it was easier to trade big for big or small for small. You can absolutely do that too. That is totally valid. Uh, Packing up. It helps to know when teardown starts and ends. They usually give you a certain amount of hour window of time to take down your things at the end of a show. Do it as quickly as possible so that the staff can take down tables and chairs. Again, this comes down to the staff booked that venue for a certain amount of time, and everybody has to be out within a particular amount of time. Honor that, pack up, and head out as quickly as you can. These two suitcases, I'm so proud of myself because I have managed to fit everything that I bring with me to events within these two suitcases. I used to incorporate milk crates into my table setups. And that was when I had a like rolling cart that I could stack them on top of. However, as I have gotten to doing more and more shows further away from home, it's just easier to have suitcases to fit them all in. Um, that said, if you opt for doing a lot more local shows, I highly recommend milk crates. And I'm not talking like the wire crates from Amazon or whatever. I am talking actual honest to God milk crates, the kind that you like pipe from the back of a convenient food mart or something. The stuff that milk jugs come in. Like if you can get those, absolutely get those. They make for great carrying devices for convention gear. They also work really well for just plopping on top of the table to act as an extra shelf space and extra uh what's the word I'm looking for? Like an extra place to hang your prints up for display. Oh, Charlie asks, Do you slash when do you separate personal items from products when packing? So the way that I do it, I have like these two suitcases specifically for convention gear, and then I have a dedicated backpack for personal items. That's how I try to keep track of it. Also, I have a, it's not quite a binder. It's made of cloth, but it has a zipper on it. I like to use that to house my trade acquisitions. Whenever I do trades with folks, I will stuff it into that soft cloth folder so that it stays separate from the stuff that I usually bring with me for sale. Milo says, I go to events on public transport, shout out to Bart, and I use a big IKEA-sized bag to bring my stuff in my table organizer. I keep my zines organized in smaller totes. That is also a smart way to do it. Um, Totes, also a great way to carry around stuff. Whatever makes sense for you. Um, for a while, the milk crates made sense for me and my setup. Nowadays, it makes sense for me to just use these two suitcases. So, however it looks best for you is how it looks best for you. I've also seen people use the kinds of wagons that you would like carry small children in, but use that for their display items and their convention gear. So it's really like whatever works best for you and the situation that you are in. I also use these suitcases because I live on the third floor of a building. I don't necessarily want to hike up a whole bunch of stuff. It's just easier for me to carry two suitcases up the stairs and then I do it in one trip. So that is my accessibility need. And now, after all of that, have a post-mortem for the show and ask yourself, what was your favorite moment? What were your goals for this event? Did you meet those goals? And do you want to come back to this event? Why or why not? It is okay either direction. If you want to go back to a show or if you do not want to go back to a show, that is totally okay. Thank the organizers for their work putting together the show and everything that they did, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that not everybody knows about. um Often whenever I'm sharing a table with friends of mine, we will ask each other what our favorite moments were from the show that we just tabled at. And it's a really good way to reflect back on, you know, some of the like better moments of a show. Um for goals for the event, it does not have to be make the most amount of money. If your goal is to go to an event and network and make friends with as many people as possible, that is also a valid goal. If you go to an event thinking, I want to meet this specific person because I know that they are going to this event, that is also very valid. For me, one of my goals when I went to the Ann Arbor Comic Arts Fest was I found out that Jen Wang was going to be showcasing there. And I was like, I need to speak with her. And I mean, everything else about that weekend was great, but my goal was to get her autograph on a book. So it worked out. And I was like, so happy about that because I was like, goal achieved. Like, was I a vendor there? Yes. But the more important goal for me for that show was to get to speak with Jan Wang. So yeah, your goals don't have to be like make the most amount of money. It could also be like for my friend Chloe at this most recent show, her goal was to sell all of the remaining like old prints that she had still. And that is also worthy. The goal that you set for yourself is a worthy goal. Even if you don't meet that goal, it is still helpful to have a goal to reach for. Milo says, I didn't make much at my first zine event, But through trading, I made lots of connections and met people who later became close friends that I got the chance to share tables with. That is fantastic. I love seeing comments like this. Yeah. Also, getting to know your table neighbors and making connections is also a great way to meet people who you could split a table with at future events. That is fantastic. Now go forth and make zines. We still have about 15 minutes left, so if y'all have any questions about anything, feel free to leave them in the chat and I can answer them to the best of my ability. There was one thing that I did not talk about. I mentioned with my buddy Ben, because I was with Ben and Chloe at an event this past weekend, and I told them that I was doing this presentation. And Ben suggested talking about how to handle customers, in particular, the types of people that he calls table barnacles. If you don't know what that is, that's fine. I'm pretty sure that's a term that he made up. But a table barnacle is somebody who comes to your table and then they just kind of stay there and they keep talking to you. And they can sometimes stay at your table for like upwards of 30 minutes trying to monopolize your time. This is particularly something that I have noticed more is a thing at comic conventions and anime conventions. I've not had this experience too much at zine fests. Zine fest people are generally very good about like honoring and respecting your time. Um, Comic conventions and anime conventions, you know, the kinds of events where there are people who are more socially awkward and can't pick up social cues, you come across a lot more table barnacles there. Um, Honestly, the best thing that I can tell you is this is where getting to meet and talk with your table neighbors comes in really handy, because then you could come up with a code for like, hey, I have somebody that I've had at my table for a while and I need to find a way to get them away. What can I do? You can come up with a code between your table neighbors. Ben, Chloe, and I all came up with the idea of, if somebody is a table barnacle latching onto us for an extended period of time, and any of us notices this, we can turn to the person that the table barnacle is talking to and be like, hey, do you need help restocking something? And that's generally a good way to like break the spell so that the table barnacle walks away. Feel free to use that code. Charlie asks, best ways to take payment? So at shows, I offer cash card reader payments, or at least credit card. I also offer Venmo, Cash App, and PayPal. Of the methods that I offer, the most common forms of payment that I've seen are cash, credit card, and Venmo. So, yeah. Uh, Monica, I'm I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Monica says, I love seeing QR codes and signs for payment apps. You can also do that too. I've actually considered putting together QR codes for my Venmo, my Cash App, and my PayPal, just to make that easier so that I don't have to swipe off of my Square reader on my phone and bring up the app and bring up the QR code. Like, it would save so many steps if you just have the QR code already printed up and on the table. Make it as easy as possible for anyone to pay you. Yes, absolutely. You want to try to make it as easy as possible, because the more steps that there are between payment and getting the thing, the more annoyed you and the customer get. You want to try to cut that down to as few steps as possible. One moment, please. I'm going to have some tea. I actually would like to share the screen one more time just to share the resources that I talked about during the presentation. In particular, because there were two things. One being, the convention tracker sheet. Now, again, this is particular to the Midwest, but I try to incorporate other regions within that convention tracker sheet. That is at tinyurl.com/MidwestCons. I try to update that as much as I can, so keep an eye on that. And feel free to bookmark it. This is just a spreadsheet that I share with as many people as possible. I've shared it with my own Discord server, with the Cartoonist Co-op, with the Columbus Cartoon Coalition, and with a bunch of other different groups. So we try to share information and keep that as up to date as possible. The other resource is the Master Convention Packing List. This is free to download. It's a PDF that you can print out. It's a checklist for stuff to pack to take with you to an event. You can download that at tinyurl.com/conpacking. The pre-filled slots that I include on that sheet include the things that I have taken with me in the past that are just generally really good to take with you at shows regardless. Things like a first aid kit, masking tape, binder clips, aka bulldog clips, these little guys right here on my camera, pens, Sharpies, and hand sanitizer. Highly recommend you take hand sanitizer, particularly if you're going to go to a convent like a Comic-Con or an anime con. Take hand sanitizer. Masks. Some shows will offer masks at the event, some will not. So it is helpful if you can bring your own mask, bring your own mask. But the convention packing list comes with items that are just generally good for any table setup or to have behind the table. And the rest are blank so that you can fill them in as you need. Post-it notes for last minute changes. Yes, absolutely bring post-it notes for any last minute changes. They also make really good like price signage. I got to skedaddle, but thank you so much for the presentation and the resources. Super helpful. Thank you so much, Pyre. I appreciate that. Keep an eye on my Ko-fi page, ko-fi.com/Kelci D Crawford. The link is also available on the Queer Zest Zine Fest website. I will be posting this slideshow up for a free download on my Ko-fi page. So keep an eye on my Ko-fi page because I will be posting that soon. Okay, if you have any other questions, we still have like 5 to 7 minutes. So if you have any other questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I'm gonna sip some tea. For anybody who's curious, the tea is just decaf black with a little bit of honey at the bottom. It's my go-to tea whenever I do live streams or presentations or anything like that. Also, I may be doing a variation of this presentation on my YouTube channel, so keep an eye out for that as well. I'm drinking a Nepal black tea. Ooh, that sounds really good. Charlie here with good taste. All righty. What's the stand in the photo called and where did you get it? Oh, the one that's here on the screen. So this is a wire spinner rack. I actually got this by trading a different display item with a mom and pop shop because I knew the owner at the time. And I was like, hey, I have this thing that is exceptionally big and isn't all that useful. And I noticed that you're not using this spinner rack. Would you like to trade this thing for that spinner rack? Because I think you could use this thing better than I could. So that's how I got this, was actually trading an item that I already had with a mom and pop shop. I joined late and missed the good stuff. Oh, that's okay. Yes, it was very lucky. It was very lucky that I got that. Oh, the recording will be on YouTube after this event. Okay, cool. So keep an eye on YouTube. This will be available through Queer Fest Zine Fest on YouTube. Thank you for sharing all of this super helpful and practical info. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I try to make this as useful as I can. So yeah, fantastic. I think with that, we could probably wrap this up like 5 minutes early, unless anybody else has any other questions. Did you go over the different conventions? Okay, this I can talk a little bit more about. So in general, you have zine fests, comic cons, anime conventions, pop culture cons, and I'll get to the difference in a second, and art festivals. Um, oh, I do see Milo says Daiso Japan and Dollar Tree have some things that can be used for display. Absolutely pilfer your Dollar Tree and your Daiso Japan for those sorts of things. You'd be surprised at the sorts of things that you can like swipe from a dollar store that would be very good for display items. Um, and also feel free to recycle things. Like this little box that I have here, which currently houses note paper and a few other things. This is just the box that a pair of glasses came in. And I was like, ooh, this is a nice box. I'm going to keep it. I use a nail polish organizer for my zine display. Clever. So answering the question about the different types of shows. So there's Comic Cons and Pop Cons, and I would actually categorize these as two different things. They have an awful lot of overlap, but pop culture cons cover a lot of different things besides comics. They will also incorporate, for example, pro wrestling, movies, animated shows, and cosplay competitions and that sort of thing. There's a show in Washington, D.C. called Awesome Con. I would classify that as a pop culture con and not a Comic Con, because Awesome Con covers a lot of what I already mentioned, like pro wrestling, comics, and movies and that sort of thing. Comic cons are specific to comics. Those are the sorts of events that if you walk in and you spot on the floor that there are comic shops with long boxes selling back issues of like X-Men or something, those are more often Comic Cons. Zine fests are dedicated to zines, and art festivals are often just for art. Art festivals are honestly a really good place to sell your originals. Like for folks who paint their zines, you can take your original pages to art festivals. Um, Art festivals are also a really good place to bring things that are like really large. I have noticed. A makeup organizer intended for eyeshadow compacts is perfect for zines. Ooh. Now, see, I don't wear makeup, so I don't know a lot of this stuff. So thank you for sharing that, Monica and Milo. Again, Monica, if I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. But yeah, you'd be surprised at the sorts of things that you can repurpose. Oh, I got it. Cool. I got it. Sweet. Um, yeah, I have a cousin named Mariah who also has a uh unique spelling. I'm saying as somebody who's a Kelci. um oh, I see a question. Oh gosh. Can this work? Uh do you pick certain conventions based on how welcoming to zines they are, or was this a more generalized how-to? Um, so in my experience, I generally go with the shows that I can reach based on how long of a car drive it is. That's how I've done it in the past. I've gotten to a point now where I'm like, I think I could start being more selective and start going to more shows that are more amenable to zines. Um, some shows are more amenable to zines than others. Obviously, zine fests are the best place to go for if you want to showcase your zines. Anime conventions, it depends. If you make fanzines, anime conventions are a good place for that. Um, if you're going to an art fest, that might be a bit trickier to do, depending. Um, but it's possible. Particularly if you're going as like an artistic collective. Um, Sorry for popping that so close to the end, but thank you so much for your insight. It's so helpful. Thank you so much. I just noticed what the time is. So thank you all so much for having me. Good luck at your upcoming Zine Fest. I hope this is super helpful. And keep an eye out. This will be available on YouTube later. Thank you all so much for watching. And yeah, you are awesome.